The sign at the end of the dirt road read Mercer Ranch, EST, 1952, and Clara Hastings almost didn't stop. She'd been turned away from 4 farms that morning. 4. Each time, she walked back to her 2003 Honda Civic with the cracked windshield, buckled Lily into the back seat and told herself, one more, just one more. It was 11:14 a.m. She had exactly $12 in her wallet, counted twice at the gas station, each bill smoothed flat, and a daughter who hadn't eaten since the granola bar Clara had saved from the night before. Lily hadn't complained. That was the part that gutted her most. 7 years old, and she'd already learned not to ask for things they couldn't afford. "Is this the one, Mama?" Lily pressed her forehead to the window. Her breath fogged the glass. "Maybe, baby, maybe." The ranch came into view slowly, 340 acres of golden pasture behind weathered split-rail fencing, a red barn with paint peeling in long strips, cattle moving in slow, loose clusters. Farther back, a 2-story house sat under ancient oak trees, white ones, now the color of old bone. Clara parked in the gravel and told Lily to wait. She found him behind the barn, broad through the shoulders, jaw set like concrete, jeans caked with red clay to the knee. He was lifting fence posts alone and didn't look up when her boots crunched on the gravel. "Mr. Mercer." He set the post down and turned. Dark brown eyes, tired in a way Clara recognized, the tiredness that comes from carrying something heavy for years, not days. She saw the same thing every morning in whatever gas station mirror she happened to be standing in front of. "Whoever you're selling, I don't want it," he said. "I'm not selling anything." She kept her chin up. "My name is Clara Hastings. I'm looking for work, any work. I can cook, mend fences, help with livestock. I grew up on a farm in western Tennessee. I know what I'm doing." He studied her, then looked past her at the Civic. "You've got a kid in that vehicle." "My daughter, Lily. She's 7. She won't be in the way. I can work a 14-hour shift 6 days a week, whatever you need." "What happened?" he said. "Excuse me. You've got a Tennessee accent. Everything you own is in the back of that car. So what happened?" Clara felt heat climb her neck. "I lost my job in Nashville 6 weeks ago. Factory closed without notice. 3 weeks of savings, then nothing. My sister lives near Harlan. She said there might be farm work in this county." A meadowlark called from the far field, clear and repeating, like a small announcement that didn't care whether anyone was listening. "There might be," he said, "but not for you, not right now. My foreman quit last month. Best hand I have broke his arm 2 weeks ago. I don't take on workers who disappear the second something better comes along." "I won't." "Everyone says that." Clara looked at the ground. At her boots, the left one held together by electrical tape along the toe. She thought about the $12. She thought about Lily, who had not complained once. Not when they left the apartment, not the 2 nights in the back seat, not even when Clara had locked herself in a rest stop bathroom and cried for 8 minutes and thought Lily was asleep. Lily had not been asleep. "I have nowhere else to go," she said. No performance. Just the plain shape of it. Daniel Mercer stopped moving. He stood with his back to her, and something shifted in the set of his shoulders, like a lock considering whether to open. "There is one way," he said, almost to himself. "If this story is landing somewhere real for you, go ahead and leave a like. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to make a choice you couldn't afford not to make? Let's hear it. We'll keep going." He turned. Something resolute had settled into his face. "I need a wife," he said, "before sunset today." Clara actually looked behind her, as if he might be talking to someone else. "I'm sorry?" "A beat. My father died 14 months ago. Left me this ranch with a condition. I have to be married by my 38th birthday, or the land goes to my cousin Richard. He said the name the way people say something they stepped in. I turned 38 in 6 days. The justice of the peace is scheduled for 5 o'clock. Already paid." The woman I had arranged called off this morning. Clara stared at him. "You want to marry a stranger. I want to keep my land." No apology, just the arithmetic of it. "Room and board, $20,400 a month. Medical coverage for your daughter, 1 year. We file for divorce when it's done, legal and clean." She turned and looked at the Civic. Lily had climbed into the front seat, watching through the windshield, chin on her folded hands, patient in the way children are when patience is all they have left. She had bruise-colored shadows under each eye. She'd been coughing for 9 days. Clara had been telling herself it was allergies. She turned back. "You don't know me," she said. "I know you've been to 4 farms before mine, and I know you're not willing to let your daughter go without because your pride won't bend." He held her gaze. "Right now, that's enough." The air smelled like cut grass and rain coming from somewhere west. Behind her, Lily was waiting with Earl the stuffed rabbit, 2,400 a month, medical. "I have conditions," Clara said. "Go ahead. Lily and I share a room. She doesn't sleep anywhere without me. Done. In private, we're honest with each other. No performances when nobody's watching. Agreed. If I ever feel my daughter isn't safe here, I leave. No argument." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he extended his right hand, wide palm, rough with years. "We have a deal, Miss Hastings." "Clara," she said. "Not Miss Hastings." She took his hand, one firm shake. "Daniel," he said. The house smelled like cedar and old coffee and wood smoke and years. The kitchen was large and plain, copper-bottomed pots on a rack, a cast-iron skillet so seasoned it was nearly black. A recipe card tacked above the sink in a woman's careful handwriting. Biscuits, 400 de gras, 18 minnow. Clara didn't look at it long. The room upstairs was small and clean. 2 twin beds with white quilts, a window facing the oaks, a braided rug in faded blue. "This is a nice room, Mama," Lily announced, turning in her slow reviewing circle. "Yeah? What makes it nice?" "The window shows trees, and it smells like a real house." A pause. "Not like the car." Clara sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her palms against the quilt. Old cotton, worn soft by years of washing by hands that had cared. She held herself very still. Okay, she thought. Okay. She was marrying a stranger in 3 hours because she had $12 and a sick daughter and nothing else. She was doing the thing you do when careful options run out and the only ones left are the wild ones. She was terrified. She was also, beneath that, something she couldn't quite name, a stubborn steadiness. Like her feet had found ground she didn't expect to be there. "Is the farmer nice?" Lily asked. Clara thought about Daniel Mercer's tired, dark eyes. About, "I know you're not willing to let your daughter go without because your pride won't bend." "I think he used to know how to be someone," she said carefully, "and something happened, and now he's still figuring out how to be that person again." Lily considered this with the gravity of a small philosopher. "Like you," she said simply. Clara looked at her daughter, at the total, uncalculated certainty of that statement. "Yeah," she said softly, "like me." The ceremony lasted 11 minutes. Howard Webb, Justice of the Peace, 62 years old, smelling of peppermint, had done north of 300 weddings in Harlan County. He'd seen stranger. He read the words. They said them back. When it came time for the ring, Daniel reached into his shirt pocket and produced a plain gold band, worn but polished to a quiet shine. He slid it onto Clara's finger without quite meeting her eyes. It was a half size too large. She curled her fingers close to keep it from sliding. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Howard glanced between them with practiced neutrality. "You may, well, you know the rest." They did not do the rest. Howard accepted his envelope, told Lily she was a very pretty young lady, and was in his truck by 5:11 p.m. Clara stood in the kitchen of Mercer Ranch with a gold ring on her finger and a husband she'd met 4 hours ago. "Well," she said. "Well," Daniel said. Lily looked between them. Then, with 7-year-old pragmatism, "Can we have dinner now? I'm really hungry." Clara made tomato soup and cornbread from what the pantry had. They were halfway through dinner when headlights swept across the kitchen window. Daniel's face went flat and still in an instant. He walked to the front window without a word. She heard a car door, boots on porch steps, 3 sharp knocks. The man on the other side was 55, thick through the neck, with a rancher's tan and a smile that lived only on the surface of his face. Good jacket, hat in hand. "Daniel." "Too warm." I heard you got married today. You heard right. Richard Holt's eyes swept past Daniel and found Clara immediately. Moved to Lily, who had gone very still at the table. Moved back. The smile stayed perfectly in place, while something behind it quietly recalculated. Congratulations. He looked at Clara. Aren't you going to introduce us? Clara walked to the doorway and stopped at Daniel's side. Clara Mercer, she said. The name felt strange and sharp-edged in her mouth, a word in a language she was just beginning to learn, but she said it like it was the realest thing she'd said all day. Richard's handshake was one beat too long. Lovely. Funny timing. 6 days before your birthday, Daniel. Your daddy sure was thorough with that will. He usually was, Daniel said, steady, giving nothing. Richard looked at Lily, who watched him over her spoon with the frank, unblinking assessment of a child who hasn't learned to pretend she doesn't notice things. Sweet little girl, he said. Thank you, Clara said. I'll have you both over for supper soon. Get to know the new Mrs. Mercer properly. He put his hat on. Welcome to the family, Clara. He left. His truck, new model, black, not a scratch on it, disappeared down the dark road. Clara and Daniel stood in the doorway until the taillights were gone. He didn't believe it, Clara said. No. What happens if he contests it? He'll look for proof. He's had a lawyer on retainer for 14 months. He's been watching this birthday the way a hawk watches a field mouse. Clara looked at the empty road. Then we'd better be convincing, she said. She went back to the table, sat down, picked up her spoon. When she looked up, Daniel was watching her with an expression she hadn't seen on him yet. Not quite gratitude, something adjacent to it, something that looked like, I didn't expect that. He came back to the table and ate his dinner, and that was the first night. Later, in the dark, with Lily's warm weight curled against her side, Clara stared at the ceiling and listened to the silence of the ranch. Wind in the oak leaves, one distant cattle call, the creak of an old house settling. She turned the ring on her finger. Still too large, still cold. 1 year, she told herself. Just 1 year. Lily coughed once in her sleep. Clara pulled her closer, closed her eyes, held on. She was awake before the ranch was. 5:23 a.m. Clara, dressed in the dark, jeans, boots, flannel, and slipped downstairs. She'd never been able to sleep in strange places. She'd stopped fighting it years ago. She started coffee and stepped out the back door. Daniel was already there, sitting on the top porch step, mug in hand, looking east. He didn't turn when she came out. She sat 1 step below him. The morning was coming in at the edges, a pale grey seam on the horizon, the oaks slowly separating themselves from the dark. What time do you start? She said. 5:30. Cattle need feeding before the dew burns off. Then I'll be ready. He looked at her sideways. You don't have to start today. You just got here. I know. She held her mug. I want to. Something in his expression shifted, like a man crossing something off a list he'd been skeptical about. East pasture first, he said. 4 fence posts down in the south quarter from the last storm. Barn roof has a leak I've been patching every time it rains. He paused. Where do you want to start? East pasture, then the fencing, Clara said. I'll look at the roof, if there's still light. He nodded once. They drank their coffee in the grey, pre-dawn quiet and said nothing else, which felt to Clara's surprise like something instead of nothing. His one remaining hand was Buck Wheeler, 54, built like a stump, white mustache, eyes that missed nothing. When Clara showed up at the feed shed at 5:31 a.m., in work gloves and worn boots, Buck looked at her, then at Daniel behind her, then back. You know how to throw a bale, he said. The tone of a man who has asked this 400 times and heard 300 bad answers. Since I was 9, Clara said. Buck looked at Daniel one last time. I like her, he said simply, and went back to work. It took 20 minutes for her body to remember what it knew, the weight of the bales, the grip angle, how you lead with your hips if you want to last past noon. By 7:02 a.m., and her shirt was dark at the shoulders and her forearms were burning in the good familiar way that meant honest work. And she felt for the first time in 6 weeks like a version of herself she recognized. At 7:30, she caught Daniel watching her from across the fence line. He dropped his eyes and went back to the water trough. She filed that away. Buck found her 2 posts deep into the south fence repair at 9 o'clock. "Where'd you learn fencing?" he said. "My father, Western Tennessee, 40 acres, not enough money to hire people. You learn everything fast when the alternative is your cows on the county road." Buck chuckled and leaned on the gate. He watched her work for a moment. "Daniel didn't want to do it this way," he said. "The marriage arrangement. He tried other options first. He pushed off the gate. He's not the kind of man who takes the easy way when there's a right way instead." He walked back toward the barn without waiting for her to respond. Clara picked up the post driver and kept going. Richard's attorney arrived at noon. Thin man, grey suit, leather briefcase. The precise expression of someone who has learned to make intrusion sound like courtesy. He stood in Daniel's kitchen, which Clara had swept, wiped, and reorganized that morning. The copper pots gleaming, the dish towels folded straight, and he opened a notebook. Just a few routine questions. Estate matters. He asked where they'd met, how long they'd known each other, Clara's work history, previous addresses, whether Lily was enrolled in any local school. Clara answered each one. She'd built the story in the hour before he arrived. She'd been planning to move closer to her sister. She and Daniel had met on Route 119 when her car overheated. He'd stopped. They'd been seeing each other quietly since. She hadn't wanted to make a fuss. She said it without hesitating, and every answer was truth-adjacent, truth-shaped, and she didn't feel the lie of it, which told her something she wasn't ready to name yet. Garrett asked to see the marriage license. Daniel produced it, crisp, stamped, Howard Webb's signature clear across the bottom. Garrett examined it with the focused attention of a man looking for something specific. "One more thing." He looked at Clara. "Your daughter, what does she call Mr. Mercer?" The air shifted. Clara opened her mouth. The back door opened. Lily walked in from the garden, hands muddy to the wrists, Earl tucked under one arm, her yellow dress grass-stained at the knee. She stopped when she saw the stranger. She looked at Clara, then she looked at Daniel. "Are you being bothered?" she asked him directly. With zero performance, just the real, simple question. Something moved through Daniel's face, like light under water. Quick, illuminating, gone before you could be certain you'd seen it. "Not anymore," he said. Lily nodded, satisfied, and went to wash her hands. Garrett closed his briefcase. "Thank you for your time." He left without shaking hands. When his car had gone, Buck appeared in the back doorway, hat in hand. "He gone? He's gone," Daniel said. Buck looked at Lily making a peanut butter sandwich with surgical concentration. "Smart kid," he said. "She is," Clara said. She didn't look at Daniel, but she felt him beside her in the kitchen, and the space between them was different than it had been yesterday. Less like a business arrangement, more like something that happens between two people who have been through a day together and come out the other side still standing. Buck left at 5:30. Lily ate dinner and fell asleep on the couch before Clara had finished clearing the plates, Earl tucked under her chin. Daniel carried her upstairs without being asked, carefully, steadily, without bumping her head on the doorframe, with the practiced calm of someone who has carried sleeping children before. He didn't say anything about it. He went back downstairs. Clara covered Lily, listened to her breathing, still a little rough, and went down. They sat on the porch again. The night was warm, and the fireflies had come out past the fence line, small blinking lights in the dark grass. Daniel brought 2 mugs of coffee without asking. He handed her one without comment. She took it without thanks. A small grammar they were building between them. "He'll send someone else," Daniel said after a while. "Garrett, that wasn't the last visit." "I know. He's thorough." "So am I." Clara looked at the fireflies. "I've been doing hard things without a safety net for 7 years. I know how to hold a position." He was quiet. "Lily's father," he said, not prying, just trying to understand the landscape he was in. "He's not around. He left before she was born. Sends $300 a month. That's the sum of his involvement." Daniel's jaw tightened once, briefly. "That's a small number for a large thing," he said. "It is." The whippoorwill started up behind the barn. A Mercer keeps his word, Clara said. She wasn't sure why she said it then. Daniel looked at her sharply. Where'd you hear that? Buck. This afternoon. He looked back at the dark field. It's what my father always said. About himself. About us. He was quiet for a moment. He called me the week before he died. I hadn't been to the ranch in 3 months. I'd been living in a motel in Pineville, pretending I was doing paperwork, not talking to anyone for days at a stretch. He called and said, Daniel, a Mercer keeps his word. You gave Sarah your word you'd live. So live. His voice was level, but the words cost something underneath. That was the last real conversation we had. Clara held her coffee mug and looked at the fireflies. Who was Sarah? She asked, gently. My wife. Plain. But the plainness of it cost something. She died 2 years ago. Car accident February. She was 36. I'm sorry, Clara said. He nodded, accepting it without deflecting, his own kind of dignity. Lily coughed once from the upstairs window above them. Clara was on her feet before the sound finished. She okay? Daniel said. I'll check. She went inside and up the stairs. In the hallway, the third door on the left had its brass lock. She'd noticed it that morning. She noticed it now. The locked door, she said, not quite turning back. What's behind it? A pause from below. That's Sarah's room, Daniel said. I'd be grateful if you left it. Of course, Clara said. She checked on Lily, sleeping, not feverish, and lay down in the dark. She thought about a woman's handwriting on a recipe card, a ring worn smooth and kept in a shirt pocket, a locked door that a man had not opened in 2 years. Grief, she thought, is a room you lock, not because you want to forget what's inside, but because you don't know yet what to do with it. She thought about that until she slept. It started at 2:07 a.m. Not a cough this time, the high, shallow breathing that had moved past allergies into something else. She had Lily's forehead under her palm before she was fully awake. 102, 4 degrees. Mama, small, rough, like something worn down. I've got you, baby, right here. She gave Lily the children's Tylenol she'd moved to the nightstand 3 days ago, because she'd known and hadn't wanted to know, and sat with a cool cloth on her forehead while the cough came every 12 minutes, deep and rattling. At 3 a.m., a knock, soft, careful, the knock of someone who knows there might be someone asleep. She opened the door. Daniel was there in a grey t-shirt and jeans, hair uncombed, eyes fully awake. He was holding a glass of water. I heard her, he said. Clara looked at him for one unguarded second. 6 weeks of doing everything alone. And here was someone who had simply appeared with a glass of water at 3 in the morning, and something in her chest came loose before she could stop it. Thank you, she said. She took the glass. He looked past her at Lily, at Earl pressed tight against her chest, at the audible effort of her breathing. She needs a doctor, he said. In the morning, it is the morning, the same steady finality as we have a deal. My truck's faster, 5 minutes. Clara didn't argue. She went to get Lily's shoes. They were in the truck by 3:12 a.m. Lily stretched across the back seat under Daniel's barn jacket, which was large enough to cover her twice and smelled like hay and motor oil and something warmer underneath. Dr. Elaine Pruitt met them at the door of her practice at 3:32 a.m. because Daniel had called ahead. 60-something, silver-haired, glasses on a beaded chain. She listened to Lily's chest for a long time, checked her oxygen, 96%, looked at the shadows under Lily's eyes. Bronchitis, she said. Early stage. You caught it right. She wrote the prescription, azithromycin, 5-day course. Fluids, rest, keep her warm. Then she looked at Daniel. I didn't know you'd gotten married, she said. The tone of someone who has been watching a person for a long time and has noted a new development. It was recent, Daniel said. She looked at Clara. Her gaze was direct and unhurried. Not suspicious, not warm exactly, but carefully attentive, storing things, deciding what they meant. Well, she said finally, good. The word contained a whole conversation she had decided not to have out loud. The pharmacy didn't open until 6. They sat in the truck in the gas station lot next door, while Lily slept across the back seat. The sky beyond the lot lights had gone that dark blue just before dawn, not light yet, but the idea of light. "She's going to be fine," Daniel said. He was watching Lily in the rear-view mirror. "I know," Clara said. "She's tougher than she looks, and she looks pretty tough." The corner of his mouth moved. "What did Elaine mean?" Clara asked. "When she said good, she knew Sarah," Daniel said. "Watched us get married, watched everything after." His hands rested easy on the wheel. "I think she saw someone who got out of bed at 3 in the morning for someone else's sick kid. And I think that was enough for her." Clara looked at him. She looked for a long moment. She thought about what Buck had said. He's not the kind of man who does things the easy way when there's a right way instead. Daniel paid for the prescription before Clara had finished reaching into her bag. She started to say something. He looked at her with an expression that was not unkind, but was completely final. "We'll settle accounts later," he said. "Right now, she needs the medicine." Clara closed her bag. On the drive back, Lily sleeping, the morning arriving in long gold bands across the Kentucky hills. Clara watched the landscape and tried to name what she was feeling. She couldn't. "Your father," she said after a while. "The will. Why the marriage conditions specifically? Why not just leave the land to someone else if you let it go?" "He believed in structures," Daniel said. "He thought if you built the right fence, people moved through it the right way. He drove through a stand of maples, sunlight coming through the new leaves in moving pieces. After Sarah died, I stopped caring about the ranch, about most things. He watched that, and I think he figured, give Daniel something to fight for, and he'll have to come back to being someone who can fight." A pause. "He called me the week before he died. Said, 'A Mercer keeps his word. You gave Sarah your word you'd live. So live.'" Clara looked at her hands. "My mother died when I was 14, she said. She hadn't planned to say it. My father never talked about it, but he got up every morning and worked. I used to think that was just who he was. Now I think it was him keeping a promise." "To who?" "To her. To us. To the version of himself that knew what mattered." Daniel was quiet. Then, "I think that's exactly right." They drove without words after that, but not without something, a kind of altered air, the way things feel after a storm has moved through and left everything washed and very still. Lily woke as they pulled into the gravel yard. She sat up slowly, the barn jacket sliding off her shoulders, Earl clutched in both arms, blinking at the shapes of the ranch in the morning light. "Are we home?" she said. Clara started to answer. She found she had to think about it, because home was a word with weight, and she'd been careful with heavy words her whole adult life. But she looked at the oak trees, the bone-white house, the red barn with its character, the gravel she already recognized by sound. "Yeah, baby," she said. "We're home." That afternoon, while Lily slept under the azithromycin and Daniel worked the fence, Clara cleaned. Her reflex when things were too large to sit still with. She made herself useful in each space until it felt less foreign. She was working her way along the upstairs hall, dustcloth in hand, when the linen closet door swung open too fast. Something fell off the top shelf, a manila envelope, flat, unsealed, open at the flap. She picked it up, told herself she was just making sure it wasn't anything important. One photograph slid out, black and white, 1980s by the look of the clothes. Two people standing in front of the Mercer Ranch sign when the letters were still fresh and the wood still new. A tall man with a square jaw. She recognized him, could see Daniel in it. And beside him, a woman with dark hair and a wide smile and a way of standing, hips slightly canted, one hand raised to shade her eyes, that stopped Clara's breathing. She turned the photograph over. Thomas and Margaret, June 1984. Thomas Mercer, Daniel's father, and Margaret. Her mother's name had been Margaret. Her mother, who had died in western Tennessee when Clara was 14, who had grown up somewhere in the border country. Clara had never asked exactly where, because the dying had made the before too painful to revisit. Her mother, who had dark hair and a wide smile, and stood with her hips slightly canted and her hand raised to shade her eyes. Her mother, looking back at her from 1984. The photograph was in her hands and her hands had gone cold. She slid it back into the envelope, carefully, with both hands, like something that might shatter if she moved too fast. She set it on the hall table. She stood in the afternoon quiet of the house, her daughter sleeping down the hall, the man she had married for survival mending fences in the south field, and felt the world tilt slowly on its axis. She had almost not stopped at that sign. She'd been running out of options, out of money, out of road, and she had turned down a dirt drive in Kentucky and knocked on the door of a man whose father had known her mother in 1984. Accident, she thought, and then quietly, something else. She didn't have answers. She had a photograph in an envelope and a question too large and too strange to ask tonight. But she stood there in the yellow afternoon light of the second floor of Mercer Ranch, and for the first time since she'd gotten back in that car, and told herself one more, just one more. She thought, I was supposed to stop here, something has been waiting. By day 4, Lily's fever was gone. She sat at the kitchen table at 7 a.m. with a bowl of oatmeal and her drawing book, her colour back, her voice clear, Earl propped against the sugar jar so he could watch her work. She was drawing the barn, the red paint, the big double doors, the way the rooster perched on the fence post every morning at exactly 6:15, as if he had somewhere to be. Daniel looked at the drawing when he passed through for coffee. He looked at it for longer than Clara expected. That's the east door, he said. The hinge on the right side has been off since March. Lily examined her drawing critically. I know, I drew it that way because that's how it looks. Daniel looked at the drawing once more. Then he poured his coffee and went outside without comment. But Clara saw, in the half-second before he turned, something pass through his expression. Not a smile, something quieter than a smile, something that took up more space. She went back to making biscuits 400 degrees, 18 minutes. She'd made them every morning since the first day. Nobody had mentioned the recipe card above the sink. She had not moved it. The call came at 8:17 a.m. Daniel took it on the porch. Clara could hear the tone of his voice through the screen door, not the words, just the shape of them, flat, controlled, the specific flatness of a man receiving bad news he's been expecting. He came back in at 8:29. Richard filed a formal challenge, he said. His attorney submitted a petition to the county court this morning, contesting the validity of the marriage. Clara set the dish towel down. On what grounds? Insufficient proof of a genuine relationship prior to the marriage date. He said it the way lawyers talk when they've gotten inside your head. He's requesting depositions for both of us and Buck. She looked at him. His jaw was set, and his eyes were carefully level, which she'd learned meant he was working hard to keep something contained. When? 2 weeks. He picked up his mug. His lawyer is good. He'll dig for every inconsistency, every gap, everything that doesn't track. Then we close the gaps, Clara said. Clara, we close them. She held his gaze. What does a genuine relationship look like? We figure out what we don't know about each other, and we know it. Before that deposition. He looked at her for a long moment. All right, he said. They started that evening on the porch, with the fireflies going and 2 mugs of decaf between them. Lily was in bed, breathing clear, and even now, Earl on the pillow beside her. Daniel went first. He told her about his parents, Thomas and Eleanor Mercer, married 41 years, this ranch the center of everything. He told her about growing up on it, the exact acreage of every field, the names of cattle he'd known as a boy. He told her about leaving for college in Lexington, coming back, meeting Sarah at a hospital fundraiser when he was 27. She was working the registration table, he said. I was late, and I said sorry, and she said, you're not sorry. You're just used to being forgiven. I thought that was the most honest thing anyone had ever said to me. He said it looking at the dark field, not performing the memory, just holding it up to the light. What was she like? Clara asked. Methodical, funny in a dry way. She had this thing she did when she was thinking. She'd tap 3 times on whatever surface was closest. He paused. I still hear it sometimes. 3 taps. Then I look and nobody's there. Clara held her mug with both hands. And after, she said softly, After, he exhaled. I kept the ranch running because my hands knew what to do even when the rest of me didn't. Buck kept me honest. Elaine checked in, but mostly I was just present in the building, going through the motions of being a man who lived here. He looked at her. And then my father died and left me that condition, and I spent 14 months trying to make it work with someone who made sense on paper, and she called off the morning you showed up. Clara said nothing. I don't think it was an accident, he said. Her calling off? No. I think the right kind of person knows when they're the wrong kind of fit. She looked at him. He looked at the field. Your turn, he said. She told him about Tennessee, the 40 acres, the yellow farmhouse that her father had painted every 5 years because he said a house needed to know somebody was paying attention to it. She told him about her mother, Margaret. Dark hair, wide smile, the way she could make any room feel like it had just been opened after being closed too long. She told him about the day the tractor rolled on the South Hill. She'd been in the barn. Hadn't heard anything until Mrs. Kellum from the next property came running down the road. She'd been 14. My father never said her name again after that day, Clara said. Not once, but every year on her birthday he drove to the cemetery, and he stayed for exactly 1 hour, and he came home and went back to work. He did that every year until he couldn't drive anymore, and then he had me take him. Where did she grow up? Daniel asked. Conversational, just filling in the picture. Clara's heartbeat changed. I'm not entirely sure, she said carefully. I know it was somewhere in the border country. She used to say that once when you'd been to both Tennessee and Kentucky. You stopped being sure which side of the line you were really on. She paused. I never asked more than that. I should have. I just didn't, and then I couldn't. Daniel nodded slowly. She watched his face, wondering if anything had registered, any echo of the name she hadn't said. His expression was open and attentive and gave nothing away that she could read. She would have to ask him directly. She knew it, just not yet. Not tonight. What are you afraid of? She said instead. He looked at her, mildly surprised by the direction. That's a question for a deposition, not an evening on the porch, he said. It's a question I'd know the answer to if we were what we're claiming to be. He was quiet for a moment. Becoming someone who used to live, he said. I was there once. I don't want to go back. He turned the mug in his hands. What about you? Clara looked at the fireflies. That Lily will grow up thinking that love is something that happens to other people, she said. That she'll learn from me that you keep your head down and you survive, and that's enough. He didn't offer anything in response to that. He just let it sit, which was, she was beginning to understand, its own kind of answer, the answer of a man who doesn't fill silences because he thinks they need filling. They sat until 10 p.m. and went in. The second thing that happened in week 1 was Diane. She arrived Thursday at noon in a white Lexus with a casserole covered in foil and a smile that could have been framed and hung. She was about 50, polished in the way of women who treat themselves like a project, and she had known Daniel since he was 12. She was also, Clara understood within 90 seconds, a woman who had been quietly designated, by her own estimation and possibly by the county's, as the most appropriate future Mrs. Mercer. She stood in the kitchen and set the casserole down and looked at Clara with a friendliness so meticulously constructed that it was almost art. We're all just so delighted, she said. It was so sudden, of course. Nobody knew a thing. And with the birthday so close, a gentle laugh, bells going off inside it. Well, love works in mysterious ways, doesn't it? It does, Clara said. And where did you say you were from? Nashville originally, Western Tennessee before that. Diane looked at Clara's hands, at the calluses, at the chipped nail on the left thumb from where she'd caught it on the fence wire 2 days ago. Her expression didn't change at all. And you have a little girl? Lily. She's upstairs. Sweet. Diane looked around the kitchen, at the biscuit pan on the stove, at the copper pots gleaming, at the recipe card above the sink. Her eyes stopped there for just a moment, half a second, barely perceptible, and then moved on. Well, she said, with a warmth that was perfectly calibrated, we'll have to have you over for dinner soon, once you've all settled in. She left 20 minutes later. Daniel came in from the field and looked at the casserole on the counter. "Diane," he said. "Diane," Clara confirmed. He looked at her. "Are you all right?" She was perfectly polite. "That's not what I asked." Clara looked at him for a moment. Then she picked up the casserole and put it in the refrigerator. "She looked at your mother's recipe card," she said. "That's the only thing that got to me." The room was quiet. "You notice that?" Daniel said. "I notice most things." He leaned against the counter and looked at the card, at the careful blue ink. "My mother wrote it for Sarah," he said. "First week they were together. Wanted her to have something to start with." He paused. "Sarah made them every Sunday morning. She was never as good as my mother, but she tried every week. She kept notes in the margin." He pointed, and Clara looked, and she saw now, in pencil so light she'd missed it the first 100 times. "More butter. 425 next time. He likes the dark edge." She stood there and looked at those small pencil notes, the record of a woman learning how to make someone happy, and she felt the weight of them the way you feel the weight of things that belong to other people's lives. "I'll leave the card," she said. "I know," Daniel said, and then, before she could think about it too much, "Daniel, the photograph, in the linen closet, Thomas and Margaret, 1984. He went very still. "I found it when I was cleaning," she said quickly. "I wasn't looking. It fell." She met his eyes. "Who was Margaret?" A long pause. "A woman my father knew before he met my mother," Daniel said carefully. "They grew up near each other. He talked about her sometimes. Said she was the one who taught him what it meant for a place to be a home. She moved away sometime in the late 80s. He lost touch." Clara's hands were cold. "He never mentioned her last name," Daniel said. Then he looked at her expression, which she had not managed to keep entirely neutral, and something shifted in his face. "Clara, why are you asking?" She looked at him. "My mother's name was Margaret," she said. "She grew up somewhere in the border country. She died in western Tennessee in 1997, when I was 14. She held his gaze. She had dark hair and a wide smile, and she stood with her hip canted and her hand up to shade her eyes, exactly like that photograph. The kitchen was completely silent. Daniel stared at her. Then he walked out of the kitchen, not in anger, not in panic, and she heard his boots on the stairs, and then silence, and then the sound she'd been waiting for since she'd read those names on the back of a photograph. The brass lock on the third door turning open. She waited at the foot of the stairs. She did not go up. She stood in the hallway with her hand on the newel post, and she listened to the quiet of the house, Lily's even breathing from the room at the end of the hall, the oak trees moving outside, and she waited. He came down 12 minutes later. He was holding a small box, wooden, old. The kind of box a person keeps because they cannot bring themselves to throw it away and cannot bring themselves to open it, and so they simply carry it. He set it on the kitchen table between them. Inside, letters, photographs, a folded piece of notepaper so old it had creased to a kind of tissue, and on top of everything, a photograph she had not seen before, newer than the 1984 one, taken in better light, a woman with dark hair and a wide smile standing in front of a yellow farmhouse that Clara knew the exact shade of yellow of because her father had repainted it every 5 years. Her mother, in front of their house in western Tennessee, with the date written on the back in Thomas Mercer's hand, August 1991. "He went to find her," Daniel said. His voice was very even. "After he met my mother, after he was happy. He still went once, I think, to make sure she was all right." He paused. He never said. He kept the box. "I found it after he died, and I didn't know who she was, so I put it in the closet and locked the door." Clara looked at the photograph of her mother standing in front of their house. Her mother was smiling at whoever was behind the camera, and her hand was up to shade her eyes, the exact gesture from 1984, and she was wearing a blue dress that Clara remembered because she had found it in the back of the closet at 15 and kept it for 3 years before she could give it away. "She never told me," Clara said. "He never told me," She would have been, Clara counted, 24 in 1984. She met my father in 1987. She would have been... She stopped. She pressed her fingers against her eyes for a moment. She never talked about before. Any of the before. Neither did he, not to me. Daniel was looking at the box, but he kept it. For 30 years. He kept it. Clara looked at the photograph until her eyes blurred. She blinked. She looked again. I almost didn't stop at that sign, she said. I know. I was going to keep going. I told myself one more and I almost didn't. But you did, he said. She looked at him. I was supposed to stop here, she said. He held her gaze. I think so, he said quietly. I think that too. Richard Holt chose Saturday for his move. He chose it carefully. A community fundraiser dinner at the Harlan County Grange Hall. 43 people present, including 3 members of the county board and Howard Webb, who had performed the marriage. He chose it the way a man chooses his footing before he throws his weight, deliberately with maximum witnesses. Clara knew it was coming at 6 p.m. when Richard walked in and went straight to Howard Webb's table with his lawyer Garrett beside him, and did not look in their direction once. She told Daniel. I know, he said. What do we do? We eat dinner, he said, and we let him come to us. They were halfway through dinner when Garrett stood up and called for attention. He did it pleasantly, which was his gift, the ability to make an ambush sound like an announcement. I apologize for interrupting a lovely evening, he said, to a room that had gone immediately attentive. I have a procedural matter I'm obligated to raise before the court date, a question of public record. It'll only take a moment. Richard was watching Daniel the way a man watches a chess piece he intends to take. Garrett pulled out a document. Mr. Mercer, he said, could you tell us how long you and your wife knew each other before you were married? 43 people looked at Daniel. Daniel set down his fork, folded his napkin, looked at Garrett with the absolute stillness of a man who is not afraid of what's coming because he has already decided what he's going to do. No, he said. Garrett blinked. I'm sorry. I said no. Daniel stood up. His voice was even and carried without effort. I'm not going to answer your question, Garrett, and here's why. The room was very quiet, because the question assumes that the length of time 2 people have known each other is the measure of what they are to each other. And I've been alive long enough to know that's not true. He looked at Richard. My cousin has been preparing for this moment for 14 months. He has spent 14 months waiting for me to fail to meet the condition of my father's will. He has not spent 14 months wondering whether I was okay, whether I needed anything, whether there was anything he could do. He paused. That's its own kind of answer. Richard's face had not changed, but something behind it had shifted. As for my wife, Daniel said. He reached across the table and took Clara's hand. She looked at him. He looked back. He gave her nothing with the look. No direction, no signal, just, I'm here. Whatever you do, I'm here. So she stood up. She had not planned what she was going to say. She hadn't planned any of this. She stood up in the Harlan County Grange Hall with 43 people watching, and a lawyer holding a document, and a man trying to take someone's land, and she thought about her father getting up every morning. She thought about a box in a locked room. She thought about a photograph of her mother standing in front of a yellow house. I came to Harlan County with $12, she said. My daughter had been coughing for 9 days, and I didn't know if it was allergies or something worse because I didn't have insurance to find out. I'd lost my job 6 weeks before that. I'd been turned away from 4 properties that morning. She was aware of the room, all 43 faces, but they had gone peripheral. She was talking to the ceiling, or to her father, or to the particular quality of air in a room when the truth is finally given enough space to fill it. I stopped at Mercer Ranch because I was out of road, not because I expected anything. I knocked on a door, and a man answered, and he looked at me the way people look at you when they see what you are instead of what you're wearing, and he made me an offer that was unusual enough to make a person say no, and I said yes. Silence. I said yes because of my daughter, but I stayed." She paused. "I stayed because of who he is. I stayed because he got up at 3 in the morning for a sick little girl who wasn't his. I stayed because he handed me coffee without being asked and knew I wouldn't take it as charity. I stayed because he keeps his word, and in my experience that is the rarest thing in the world." She looked at Richard, who was watching her with the expression of a man who has thrown a stone and watched it reverse direction. "I don't know what a real marriage is supposed to look like on the outside. I know what it looks like from where I'm standing, and from where I'm standing, this is as real as anything I've ever been part of." Nobody spoke. The silence had a quality to it, not empty but full, the way silence gets when it's been given something it wasn't expecting. Then Elaine Pruitt, who was sitting 4 tables back, set down her fork. "Well," she said, in the same tone she'd used in her driveway at 3:32 a.m. "Good." A sound moved through the room. Not quite laughter. Something warmer than that. Richard Holt looked at his lawyer. Garrett was looking at his document with the expression of a man whose document has become significantly less useful in the past 4 minutes. Howard Webb cleared his throat. "I believe we can let these good people finish their dinner," he said pleasantly. Daniel was still holding Clara's hand. She hadn't noticed she'd been holding his back. She noticed now. She looked at him, really looked in the middle of 43 people in the Harlan County Grange Hall, and he was looking at her with an expression she didn't have a word for yet. Not gratitude, not relief, something that had been there a long time, and had just been given permission to stop pretending it wasn't. She looked at their joined hands. The gold ring, still a half-size too large, still sliding when she forgot to keep her fingers curled. "You can let go," she said quietly. "If you want." "I know," he said. He didn't let go. They sat back down together. Someone started talking at another table, and then someone else, and the dinner resumed around them like a river finding its way around a new stone, changing course to include it, not to exclude it. Lily, who had been very quiet in her chair beside Clara through all of it, reached over and tapped Clara's arm. "Mama," she whispered. "Yeah, baby. You were good." "Yeah? Yeah, you sounded like Grandpa." Clara looked at her daughter, at the absolute seriousness of her 7-year-old face, at Earl, propped against the water glass. She squeezed Lily's hand once, hard, and then let go and picked up her fork. Across the room, Richard Holt stood and put on his hat and walked out with Garrett 1 step behind him, and neither of them said another word. They drove home in the dark, Lily asleep in the back seat again, same positions as the night of the pharmacy run, same barn jacket, same stars, but different. Everything was different. Clara could feel it the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm, a shift in the weight of things. They pulled into the gravel yard, and Daniel turned off the engine, and they sat in the dark for a moment. "Clara," he said. She looked at him. He looked at the steering wheel, then at her. "I know what this was supposed to be," he said. "I know what we agreed to. I know the terms." He paused. "I don't want the terms anymore." She held very still. "What do you want instead?" she said. He looked at her. The specific tiredness in his eyes was still there. It would always be partly there, she thought, because that's what grief does. It leaves a watermark. But underneath it now was something else. Something that had been there since the first morning on the porch steps, maybe, and had just been too carefully contained to name. "I want to find out what this is when nobody's making us prove it," he said. Clara looked at the house, the bone-white walls in the moonlight, the oak trees, the barn with its leaning east door hinge that Lily had drawn exactly right, because that's how it looks. She thought about $12 and 1 more, and a sign at the end of a dirt road. She thought about a photograph in a linen closet, about a mother and a father and a box of letters, and the particular mathematics of how lives intersect across decades without anyone knowing it's happening. She thought about a ring on her finger that was still a half-size too large. "Okay," she said. He looked at her. "Okay?" he said. "We find out," she said. "No terms, just find out." The corner of his mouth moved. It was more than it had been the first time, almost the whole thing. "All right," he said. They got out of the truck and carried Lily inside, Daniel on one side, Clara on the other, and put her to bed. And for the first time in a long time, Clara did not feel the weight of doing it alone. She found the letter on Sunday morning, not looking for it. She'd gone back to the wooden box, with Daniel's permission, with his knowledge, sitting across from her at the kitchen table with his coffee, and she had gone through it slowly and carefully, the way you handle things that are old enough to be fragile. There were 7 letters in her mother's handwriting. She recognized it immediately. The particular forward lean of it, the way the capital M curved back on itself. She read 4 of them before her hands started shaking. Daniel reached across the table without a word and held both of her wrists steady until she could keep going. Her mother had written to Thomas Mercer from Tennessee for 3 years, 1988 through 1991. She had written about a man she had married, a good man, an honest man, the kind her mother would have approved of. She had written about a farm, about the particular quality of the light in the late afternoon in western Tennessee, and how she'd learned to love it. And in the last letter, dated August 12th, 1991, the same month as the photograph in front of the yellow house, "I want to thank you for coming, Thomas, and for understanding why this is where I belong now. I am happy here. I'm more than happy. I'm home. I think that's what I needed you to see. I know you'll do the same. I know you'll find it. You always knew what mattered more than you let yourself act on. So act on it. Don't wait. Give Eleanor my love. Give that boy of yours all of it, your Margaret." Clara set the letter on the table. She sat with it for a long time. Daniel was quiet across from her, his coffee going cold, his eyes on her face. "She knew your mother," Clara said. "She knew you'd been born." "Yes." She told him to act on what mattered. She pressed her fingers to her mouth. "She wrote that in 1991. You were, what, 3 years old? 3.5. And my father." Clara looked at the ceiling. "My father never knew any of this. He knew her before because she grew up in the border country, but she never—" She stopped. She chose him. She came home to him and to Tennessee, and she chose it and she was happy. And then she died on the South Hill, and he got up every morning for the rest of his life and drove to the cemetery on her birthday because... She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Daniel got up from the table and came around to her side and crouched down beside her chair, and he took her hand, both hands, careful as the first time but warmer now, and held on. "It's done with grief the way it's done," he said quietly. "Your mother loved your father. She said so. She was home and she knew it." His thumbs moved over her knuckles. "And you found your way here anyway, 34 years later, with your $12 and your daughter and your one more." Clara looked at him. "Do you believe in that?" she said. "That things find their way?" He looked at her for a long moment. "I believe in building the right fence," he said. "And I believe that sometimes someone shows up who was always going to show up, and all the fence did was give them a place to stop." She laughed. It surprised her, surprised both of them. A real laugh, small and sudden and shaky at the edges. The kind that happens when something in your chest has been braced for too long and finally isn't. He smiled. The whole thing this time. It changed his face entirely. It was the face, she thought, of the person he used to know how to be. Lily came downstairs at 8:30 with Earl and her drawing book, and found them both at the kitchen table. She looked at the wooden box, at the letters, at their hands, which were not quite touching anymore, but close. She climbed into her chair and opened her drawing book. "Can I draw the inside of the barn today?" she asked. "The part with the hay and the high window." "You'll need to ask Buck to let you in," Daniel said. "He opens it at 9. "Okay." She uncapped her pencil. "Will you come with me?" She was looking at Daniel when she said it, not Clara. Daniel. He looked at her for one moment, at this small, serious, tireless person who had declared the room nice, who had told a lawyer he was being bothered, who had said you sounded like Grandpa in a way that had cracked something open in Clara's chest that she was still feeling. "Yeah," he said. "I'll come." Lily nodded with satisfaction and began to draw. Clara got up and started the biscuits. She moved around the kitchen, the copper pots, the cast-iron skillet, the window with its long bar of morning light. She measured out the flour, the butter. More butter, like the pencil note said. She reached the cabinet above the sink. She looked at the recipe card for the first time since the first day, really looked at it, the careful blue ink and the small penciled margin notes. More butter. 425 next time. He likes the dark edge. She thought about a woman who had tried every Sunday morning, who had kept notes, who had been trying to learn how to make someone happy. She thought, I can do that, I can learn that. I'm not afraid of trying every Sunday morning. She made the biscuits. On Daniel's 38th birthday, Clara did 3 things. First, she had Buck drive her into Harlan before sunup. She came back with a ring, small and plain and gold, a match to his, found at an estate sale in a felt-lined box. And at breakfast, while Lily ate her oatmeal and didn't pretend not to watch, she slid it across the table without ceremony. A Mercer keeps his word, she said. So does a Hastings. He looked at the ring for a moment. Clara, he said. It's not a proposal, she said. It's just. The ring you gave me is a half size too large. This is the same size. Yours, I mean. She paused. Wear it if you want. He picked it up. He turned it once in his fingers, the way she'd turned his in the dark, around and around. He put it on his right hand, not his left, his right, where it fit. Second, after breakfast, Daniel took them upstairs. He unlocked the third door on the left. The room inside smelled like cedar and something floral and old. Sachets, maybe, or just time settling into fabric and wood. Sarah's room was not what Clara had imagined. It was neat and warm and full of colour, bookshelves dense with novels and nursing texts, a quilt in deep jewel tones on the bed, a small watercolour above the dresser of the east pasture in autumn, a woman's room, a room that had been lived in and loved. On the dresser, beside a small framed photograph, Sarah and Daniel, younger, laughing at something outside the frame, there was a space, empty, like something had been removed. Daniel went to the bookshelf. He took down a small framed drawing, the barn, the double doors, the rooster on the fence post, and he looked at it for a moment. Then he set it on the empty space on the dresser. Clara looked at the drawing, at Lily's careful pencil lines, at the off angle of the east hinge, drawn exactly as it was. That's hers to keep, Lily said from the doorway. Having followed them upstairs in the patient, inevitable way she followed everything that interested her. I know, Daniel said. I'm just letting her have some company. Lily considered the drawing on the dresser, beside the photograph of a woman laughing at something outside the frame. That's good, she said. She probably gets lonely. Daniel looked at Lily. Something in his face went very quiet and very full at the same time. Probably, he said. He closed the door, unlocked this time, left unlocked, and they went back downstairs. Third, that evening after supper, Clara took the ring off her finger. She held it up in the kitchen light, plain gold, worn smooth, a half size too large. She got a small ball of jewellery wax from the kit in her bag. She'd bought it in Harlan, same trip as the ring, and she pressed it carefully along the inside of the band, pressed it and worked it until it was smooth and even. Then she slid the ring back on. It fit. She held her hand out and looked at it, the way you look at something when it is finally in the position it was always supposed to be in. Daniel was leaning in the kitchen doorway, watching. Better? He said. Better, she said. He pushed off the doorframe. I want to show you something, he said. Outside. It was full dark by then, warm and soft and full of fireflies. He led her around the side of the barn to the east fence, the same fence she'd been repairing the second day, where she'd driven post after post into the red Kentucky clay, while Buck leaned on the gate and told her Daniel wasn't the easy-way kind of man. Just past the fence line, at the base of the oldest oak on the property, there was a small wooden marker, weathered, carved with care, Eleanor Mercer, 2019. She always knew where home was. His mother. Clara stood beside it and said nothing. My father planted a sapling here when she died, Daniel said. He said, the right tree in the right place doesn't need much. It just needs to stay. He looked at the oak, tall and thick and absolutely settled in its ground. I used to think that was about trees. Clara looked at the oak, at the marker, at the fireflies blinking in the warm dark all around them. She felt the ring on her finger, fitting now. Exactly. She thought about two people in 1984 standing in front of a sign that would say Mercer Ranch for another 42 years. About her mother writing, "I am home" in careful forward-leaning ink in 1991. About a man getting up every year and driving to a cemetery because some promises you keep without anyone watching. About a little girl who had not complained once, not even once, in 6 weeks of hard country. She thought about what it means to be in the right place. She turned and looked at the house, the bone-white walls and the oak trees, and the light in the kitchen window where Lily was almost certainly eating the last of the biscuits, the red barn, the gravel that had its own sound under her boots now, familiar and exact. She thought about 4 farms and 1 more, and a sign at the end of a dirt road that she had almost driven past. She stood there in the warm Kentucky dark and understood, fully and finally, that some things find you because they were always going to find you, and all you had to do was stop. "Daniel," she said. "Yeah, I'm glad I stopped." He stood beside her, shoulder to shoulder, looking at the oak tree his father had planted when it was still small enough to hold in 2 hands. "So am I," he said. And from the house, through the lit kitchen window, they heard Lily's voice, clear and carrying and utterly unworried. "Are you coming back in? Are you? The biscuits are almost gone, and I have a new drawing to show you." Daniel looked at Clara. Clara looked at Daniel. "A Mercer keeps his word," she said. "Always," he said. They went back in.